Hey y'all, welcome to the Coyote Trapping School podcast. In this episode, we're going to pick up where we left off talking about nuisance trapping and get into pricing a little bit, pricing and marketing, and just kind of wrap things up. So first off though, I wanted to mention, be on the lookout, probably Monday, if you're listening to this, Monday, April, let's see, today's the 11th, 15th I think. We're going to be having a big announcement I'm super excited about. This thing right here has something to do with it, but be sure to tune in. I'm creating a premiere event on YouTube, so it'll be ready, and when it goes live, I'll be there, be able to chat with everybody. I think I've never done one of the premieres, but I'm super excited about rolling this out, and excited to get y'all's feedback and unveil the first ever Coyote Trapping School original product that I'm really pumped up about, and I think y'all are going to like it, and hopefully want to add that arsenal to your trap line. Now, right down to business. So we talked in the last episode about nuisance trapping and how a lot of times once you get into fur trapping and your name kind of gets out, it's usually pretty quick that all of a sudden you'll start getting folks asking for your services, is what it boils down to, wanting you to come trap beavers, otters, muskrats, whatever. And so we talked a little bit about kind of some other items around that and what you might need and what you might consider. But one of the biggest things that comes up is pricing, and how do I price my services? And one thing that I've noticed in myself, as much as anything, and I mentioned this in the last podcast, and I'll mention it again. I'm not a millionaire nuisance trapping mogul with all kinds of businesses, right? I still got a full-time job. I do fur trapping, and I've started, and I'm kind of pushing my nuisance stuff more, trying to grow it. By no means am I an expert. I'm just kind of portraying to you what I have learned and what I have come across as I've done this, and I've really started, kind of pushing hard to get into the nuisance space in the last 2 years. I've done off and on nuisance work before for other folks as I was kind of going through college and getting my feet wet, and that was really beneficial. But now, trying to do my own thing and grow my own business, and so like I said, this is kind of my learnings and what I've noticed. But one thing I'll say is that from my perspective at least, a lot of times as trappers, kind of humble, low-key, we don't tend to feel comfortable asking for what we're worth, for what the service that we provide is worth, if we're being honest. So if that's one thing I can try to get across to you, portray to you, is don't get hung up on the price and being concerned about, I'm charging too much. Let the market tell you that. If you're putting prices out there and you're not getting any work, maybe you are. But when you do kind of find the sweet spot and you do start getting jobs, and you'll kind of get a feel for it and say, well, this is more work than I really originally intended, so my next job might have priced accordingly and priced differently. And I've noticed the same. I myself went through the same thing of, jobs I was pricing, right off the bat. Now I may be charging double what I was charging, and nobody's balking at the price. So, that tells me, one, I myself feel like my time is, I'm actually covering what I'm worth on my time on the job. And two, I'm still getting business, and customers are still satisfied with my work. So that's kind of my main takeaway that I want you to take away from this is, when we talk about rates and different pricing, nobody balks at the mechanics for charging $75 an hour, or the plumber that charges for a $300 house call just to come out and tell you what's wrong. But yet as trappers, we're real hesitant to tell somebody, whatever you think you might be worth or necessary, $25 an hour or whatever. So that's kind of my initial takeaway. And so as we talk about pricing, there's a couple different kind of avenues or approaches that you could take to pricing. So one, pretty common, especially for new trappers, is just a per animal price. $25 a beaver, $50 a beaver, $30 a coyote, whatever. And that's okay if you're just getting into it and that's something that you feel comfortable with. Excuse me. I don't like per animal pricing, and I don't. It's tough to make sure that you're going to be adequately compensated for the job, and it's also tough to make sure that you're completing the entire job. And so, one thing that comes to mind is like a beaver job. You say, come out and look, and you got the sign, you got the lodge, you know how you're going to set everything up, and $100 a beaver. You figure there's, 2 adults, maybe 2 to 3 sub-adults, and 2 to 3 juveniles. So what's that? Let's just go on the low end: 2 adults, 2 sub-adults, and 2 juveniles. So that's $600. Okay. So you're going to spend time out there setting the job up, and if you're beaver trapping, if you're anything, I mean, you want to make the most of your time. So you want to cover that place and hit it hard when you first set it up, so that you're not making a bunch of trips back and two. But say you do set it up heavy and you catch 5 the first night, awesome. But one of those beavers got nicked in a conibear that you didn't have you had your safety catches still on. So all of a sudden you start to deal with a trap shy beaver, and so you go the next 3 days and you hadn't caught anything. Well, now you're at 4 days in and you've caught 5 beavers, so you're almost at $100 a day. And so then you're going to start to question, well, is there really another beaver? Maybe I should just pull all my traps. To me, it can incentivize you to get in there and hit them hard initially, but it also can incentivize you to pull stakes and get out before the job may be done. So if you've got that last beaver in there that's a little trap shy or something, and you're trying to pull your hair out trying to figure out how to get him, you may wind up spending more time than you originally intended to, and that's a hard thing to judge. And so that's just the gist of it. That's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of the per animal pricing. But to each his own. There's folks that do it, and so if that's what you're comfortable with, hey, get after it. Another option is a daily rate. So you may say, and what I know a lot of guys do is they'll have a setup fee and then a daily fee after that, because typically your first day on the job is when you get the most time invested, and so maybe a $250 setup fee and $100 a day after that, or something like that. So you're getting covered on the front end for all your time that you're spending there, and then those other days of just kind of maintenance and checking traps, but you're still covering your expenses of going back and forth every day, and you're not missing anything, even if you're not catching anything. You're still getting covered for that. And kind of the other, and just taking that a little bit farther, is just a per job rate. So you may go and look at a job and say, what, it's going to be $700, and that's it. Whatever time that I've got invested in it, that's going to be it. And so, and when you get to the daily rate and the job rate, ultimately you're still trying to estimate, either of those, you're trying to estimate how long it's going to take you to do that job. And in my mind anyways, I'm always putting an hourly rate to it. So if I go and look and I say, well, it's squirrels in the attic, so I'm going to have to set a trap on the outside, put a one-way door on there. I'm going to have to get in the attic every day and, verify I've got a trap in the attic too, so checking it. So, I'm going to spend, 2 hours a day every day here. So slap a daily rate on that, and the first day is probably going to take me 4 hours to set everything up right. And then another thing you've got to consider, particularly if you're doing residential stuff, is the exclusion. So is included in your service is, let me start that over again because it has a lot of is exclusion included in the service you offer? So in that $700, is that to catch the animals and do the exclusion work, or is that just to catch the animals and the exclusion work is on top of that? And that's all going to factor into how much it is. When you get into exclusion work, like I've seen some companies that offer free removal with an exclusion job. So that just tells me that exclusion is their moneymaker. That's where you can really tie up a lot of time and energy is fixing those entry holes and all. And if you're carpentry or handyman minded, you need to be a little bit, in my opinion, you need to be a little bit handy to be able to offer those services. But there's some places and some nice, expensive, fancy houses and just precarious positions where and sometimes a homeowner will offer, I got so and so that works on my house, and hey, that's perfectly fine. I'll get rid of them. You let them come and handle that. And you'll get a feel from that from the homeowners too, of who is easier to please than others. And so there's going to be some people that are going to be a headache, and you're going to be ready for that job. You didn't charge enough because you're ready for that job to be done with. But circling back, so regardless, in my opinion, the only way to really figure out what you're going to charge is to estimate how much time you've got in. You've got to have an hourly rate in mind that you apply to that. You also may want to include a mileage rate. So a lot of times that's what I'll do when I price a job. So I guess typically I do a job price, but in my head I'm thinking through a daily rate as well, and just an hourly rate. So if the customer asks, I may expand on it more, but I'll go look at a job. I try to know beforehand what the mileage is going to be, so I can factor that in. If it's a 10 miles away versus 50 miles away, that's going to impact the price, and then the time it's going to take. How long is it going to take to set up? 4 hours, 6 hours to set up? How many days do I think I can do the job in? And then is there any exclusion to do? And that's a lot of, and some of that you need to leave open-ended, in my opinion. Once you get into the exclusion, that can be very open-ended. You may not be able to really assess all of the damage until you get the animals out and are able to dig in more, and that's where it can get a lot more pricey. You start talking about replacing insulation, tearing out sheetrock, disinfecting, and things like that. I mean, that's a huge undertaking all in its own. And so there you can see why some companies, they want the exclusion work because the removal work may be 6 or 7 hours a week. The exclusion work could be 40 hours a week, or depending on what kind of work it is and how extensive it is. But one thing that I do like to do is even if it's a daily rate, I like to put a maximum on. So when I go to a landowner, typically on a residential, I'll kind of size it up and give just an overall job price on that. Again, based on how long I think it's going to take me and what materials I need. If I'm looking at a beaver job or something like that, or a coyote job, that's when I'll do a daily rate. But I depending on the situation, sometimes I like to put a cap on it, just to give the landowner a little bit of security that I'm not just going to sit out there and punch the ticket and run the tab up longer and longer and more. So I guess to kind of sum it all up, I tend to circle back to more of that job pricing. Hey, this is what the price is going to be, and this is what it includes. And then, if they want to do something different, or go from there. When you're thinking about your hourly rate, though, you've got to take into account what you yourself are going to be paid, but you can't forget about your overhead. And that's where I can't, nobody can sit here and say this is what you need to charge, because it's so variable for so many people. It's easy if you just want to say, well, I want to make X amount of money, bring home. But then, like I said, with your overhead, you've got to take into account, what your vehicle, if you got vehicle payments, if you need to replace your vehicle coming up soon, you got insurance, vehicle, and commercial, your equipment, if you need to be saving, replacing things, buying new traps, whatever. If you're using any kind of software to help with accounting or anything like that, services, legal and tax services. If you've got employees, or if you think or hope to have employees, even if it's just somebody keeping your books for you, and then benefits as well. Something that if this is going to be your full-time job, or if it's going to be a serious sideline job, all that stuff that you need to take into account. Insurance, especially if it's going to be a full-time job. Whether your wife can get insurance or you're going to have to provide that, but health insurance, disability insurance, what else? Retirement, 401k, things like that. All that stuff that any other commercial company is taking that into account in their pricing, and you need to as well. And that some of those things for somebody that's just kind of starting out are so easy to overlook, but you've got to take those into account, especially if it's something that you want to get to where you're this is more of your mainline thing. So one rule of thumb that I've kind of used and seems to work pretty well is figure out what your hourly rate is for you, your take home. We'll back into that in just a minute, and then double that. So if you say in this example that I'm going to give, our hourly rate's $26 an hour. So you double that. So say for pricing your jobs, you're going to use $50 an hour. Half of that goes to your take home pay, or your pay, not take home pay, but your pay, and the other half goes to covering expenses. And so let's get into that, and then we'll move more on it. So how do you determine your hourly rate? Well, that can be figured out a variety of different ways, but I'm going to talk about one way that you might could try to back into it, and it's all going to depend on your personal budget. I thought, and what your expenses and everything are personally, your home, car, all of your personal bills. But you got to decide, what does your pay need to be? So if your target is, just for easy math, say $50,000 a year. I want my salary to be $50,000 a year before taxes now, because the other catch is, if you're working for a company, you're only paying half of the taxes that are paid. So when you start working for yourself, you get the opportunity to pay Uncle Sam all of the taxes, and so all the employment tax, Social Security, Medicare, all that stuff is also expenses that are going to come out of your check as well, just like they do when you're working for somebody else. But so say you want to make $50,000 a year, and then just say, for good round numbers, you want to take 2 weeks off throughout the year, and then between holidays and different things, probably about another 2 weeks off overall that you're may not be working. So out of 52 weeks, you're planning on working 48 weeks. So at $50,000 for 48 weeks, that works out to $1,042 a week that you need to be bringing home. And so if you want to base that off a 40-hour work week, and when I say that, I mean 40 billable hours. So 40 hours that you are on a job where you're charging a customer for that time. And so that would work out to $26 an hour. Now, let's be real here and recognize that odds are, if you're able to bill customers for 40 hours a week, you're probably spending another 20 doing other things that are related to the business, but not necessarily being billed to anybody. Running by Home Depot and picking up supplies, cleaning, prepping traps, going to pick up new traps, stopping and talking with your accountant or your bookkeeper. Excuse me. There's a whole variety of things like that you're going to be doing in addition to the actual job. So that's something important to keep in mind, and also keep in mind that odds are, if you're just starting out, you ain't gonna have enough business to make to account for 40 hours a week. So that's gonna mean, if this is your main source of income, all of a sudden for some reason, you're gonna have to be charging more per hour to be able to make ends meet. So it's and that's kind of the good and the bad. I mean, if this is yours, if this is your personal thing, then you've got the freedom and flexibility to do what you want as long as the market accepts it. So your first job, you price at $26 an hour for you, and keep in mind that does not include any overhead. So in reality, if you're taking our rule of thumb and doubling it, so your first job you're pricing at $50 an hour, and all of a sudden you realize, man, that's not enough. If at this rate I'm not going to be able to pay my house payment or whatever, then next job you better up it. And as long as you're still getting jobs, then there's nothing foul with that. And as long as folks are satisfied with the job that you're doing. So, and one thing that I wanted to also mention so the $26 an hour doesn't include your overhead. So if you double that, just say $52 an hour, you've got all the, one thing that you want to take into account, you've got all your other things, your vehicle insurance, equipment, software, for whether you're, probably need some kind of sinking fund is kind of one thing that I've heard it called, but just for buying equipment or things that are going to come up. If you're, ideally you could be running a cash, kind of cash business where you're not taking on debt is where what I mean there. So as you get jobs and the next couple months I'm probably gonna need a new computer for work, and probably need to buy another ladder or two, or maybe I need a ladder rack for my truck. And so if you can start setting aside some of that money, kind of, I guess, as a savings account for those purchases and planning ahead, that's gonna suit you as well. And also, one thing you want to keep in mind is you want the business to be profitable too. So if you're taking our rule of thumb and you're saying, all right, I'm paying myself $26 an hour, so $50,000 a year, and then I'm also charging an additional $26 an hour to cover my overhead, but you're not, or you're just breaking even. You're just meeting all your expenses with that additional overhead consideration. Then you probably need to up your price, because one thing you want the business to be profitable. So at the end of the year, ideally, you make $50,000 a year. You've paid all your expenses, and then you've got money left over as true profit for the business. Because that, to me, that's what separates you owning a business from owning your job. If all you're making out of that, your job is $50,000 a year, and there's no, you don't see any opportunity to give yourself a raise down the road, or you're just covering your expenses and nothing more, then you're just owning your job. You're really stressing out and got a lot of weight on your shoulders for not a lot of reward. So really, in my mind, the goal is you pay yourself what you think you're worth and what you want to be paid. You cover your expenses, and then boom, there's also a chunk where, and you're going to wind up paying taxes on it. So that's kind of could be viewed as a bonus at the end of the year. I mean, to me, that's where you want to be. Is I'm paying myself what I feel like I'm worth. I'm happy with what I'm bringing home. I'm covering all my expenses, and boom, at the end of the year, hey, I got a nice bonus that we can take the family on a nice vacation, or I can reinvest it to buy another truck and try to add an employee or whatever. But that to me, the profit side is as important as anything else, and that's where it's so, there's no hard and fast rule for everybody of, hey, if you're starting a nuisance trapping business, you need to charge $55 an hour and 19 cents a mile or whatever. It's different for everybody. But I hope that gives you a kind of a guideline or something to think about, so far as if you're looking and wanting to get into nuisance trapping, how you may look at charging, at pricing your jobs. And that's one kind of easy way, if you've got a job right now, to back into it and figure out, well, right now I'm making X, and this is what I want my schedule to look like. So this is what I need to be charging per hour, theoretically. And then once you put that in practice, you'll see if that's working or not. And like I said, that's the beauty of it, is you can change and adjust as you go, because it's your business, right? The other thing I wanted to touch on was marketing, because if nobody knows about your business, then you don't have a business, right? And so one thing that the state of Georgia offers is, if you're a licensed nuisance trapper, the state keeps a list of all the licensed nuisance trappers. So if anybody calls the state with a problem with wildlife, then they'll refer that person to, you know, somebody off the list, and you can opt on if you want to be or do not want to be. And you know, depending on how many other trappers in the area, you may not be the only person in the county. So that's not a great. You may get a little bit of business from that, but that's not something you can build a business off of. In my experience, and in talking with other nuisance trappers, you know, really word of mouth is, and I think, you know, word of mouth is what promotes and runs every business. But word of mouth is the key. The only problem is, until you get established, you got very small. You don't have enough word of mouth to actually have a business. So that's where, you know, some of the things, advertising can come into play. And you know, there's all the traditional forms of advertising, billboards and radio and newspapers and all that. And then, you know, nowadays you've got so much social media advertising that you can run Facebook ads, Instagram ads, YouTube ads, Google ads. And so all that, to me, especially right now, some of the Facebook and Instagram stuff can be really beneficial and a lot more bang for your buck if you kind of dig into it and learn how to best use and broach those ads. And one thing, just in my experience, and I should say, you've got the organic side of things, which is not paying, you know, just growing things naturally, if you will. And then you've got the paid advertising side of things. So you can always, you know, it's free to have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and a YouTube channel. But a lot of those, you know, Facebook and Instagram, they're pushing businesses to, if they want to really get exposure, they need to pay for ads. And so there are things that you can do to try to kind of get free exposure, but you're not going to get a lot of free exposure unless you just have a hit or a viral video or something like that. So, and honestly, the ads you can do through Facebook and Instagram are really targeted. You can really target them to your specific area, a specific demographic, age group. And you can kind of set your own budget if you only want to spend $1 a day or $5 a day or whatever. So it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat to do and can get you some exposure. The one thing that I've seen in my experiments with it is, from my perception, it tends to be more beneficial if you're adding value, if you will. So I don't see the ads of saying, let me get your critters out, or, you know, your nuisance company, call us now, and, you know, a picture of a raccoon or whatever. I don't see those ads as being as beneficial as I can't think of the word that I'm trying to get to, but as driving people to your website or to call you, as if you're adding value. So to me, if you're saying, you know, if you put a picture of some damage that an animal does, or even you put a picture of, you know, a raccoon and say, hey, did you know that raccoons, you know, during the winter, if the temperatures get below zero, they may semi-hibernate for 5 to 6 days, or raccoons may be rabies vectors, or just different things that, you know, people may wonder about that may make people actually stop and read. It's like, come, I didn't know that. Versus if you're just out going, hey, you know, got critters, call me. You know, nobody's probably going to read whatever caption or tagline you got under there. But if you're putting, you know, one, and I'm no expert by any means, there's a lot of other folks, but if you got to have an image or a video or something that catches folks' attention first off, and that's, I'll wrap it up. That just kind of, to me, that's what I've noticed is, if you're offering value, if you're saying, hey, if you want to keep from having to call me, do these 3 things to make sure that you're not attracting critters to your house. So things like that seem to be more beneficial and more spreading your name and more encouraging people to call you than just saying, hey, got beavers, call me. Hey, got bats, call me. That can get you some for sure, but that's just my 2 cents on that. And then the last thing, there are services like Homeadvisor and Angie's List. I'm actually using Homeadvisor. They actually called me, so I'm not sure exactly if you can call them, and I'm sure you can, but that's a service where they do advertising, and so they want people to go to the Homeadvisor site and type in what the problem is and where they're at, and then they will refer that person to some of their pre-vetted contractors. And so to be offered through Homeadvisor, you've got to provide your license and all kinds of contact information, and that's where they got a lot of ums there, but so they'll kind of pre-vet folks and say, and you've got requirements as far as how quickly and how you get in touch with people, but they'll if somebody goes and says, hey, I've got bats and this is where I live, then they'll send that to 2 to 3 other contractors potentially. Then it's up to you and kind of your salesmanship of getting to that call, calling those people back in a timely manner, and pricing, and then you're kind of competing, and you pay for that. So when you get referred, you pay that, and you also pay a kind of a yearly membership fee, I guess you could say. But that, and I looked through a bunch of reviews before I signed up for that, and kind of what I saw was not just for nuisance trapping, but just for kind of home construction and remodeling services and stuff. A lot of the folks said that's a good option if you're new and trying to get established. But once you get kind of what we talked about before, once you get that word of mouth and you get more well known, it's not as beneficial. But and I could say that I can vouch from that for experience, because I know I wouldn't have had some of the jobs that I've gotten without going through that service. So that's been a plus as well. But there's all kinds of stuff you can do to get your name out there, and as like I said, as a fur trapper, and as a you're probably already got a little bit of name recognition and folks that know you. And so I hope this gives you some things to think about, and ultimately, the one thing I want you to take away: don't be afraid to charge what you're worth. If everybody's turning you down, you may be charging a little bit too much, but if a few people are turning you down here or there, it's probably just about right. If everybody's jumping on your offer as soon as you get it out of your mouth, you're probably not charging enough. So, but pay attention to the market, and don't be afraid, because we provide just as valuable a service as plumbers, mechanics, electricians, and none of those guys are bashful about charging what they're worth. And if somebody's not willing to pay it, then they'll walk away and they can find somebody else. So hope that's worthwhile. Be sure to be on the lookout for the latest, the most exciting Coyote Trapping School news yet, and Monday. Let me get you an exact date on that. Not maps. Monday, May 15th will be announced the big exciting news. So stay tuned. If you're subscribed on YouTube, then awesome. Make sure you click the notification button. And one thing I had somebody mention, if you're listening to this in podcast form, I do all of my podcasts as video form too. So some of the podcasts are really easily consumed through audio, and it's no issue. But some of the podcasts, I talk about stuff and I actually show stuff, and it can be consumed through audio, but it's also can be beneficial to go back and see what I was talking about in actuality. So all of my podcasts are posted on YouTube. I haven't been as well because my dadgum internet's slow, and for whatever reason uploading to Facebook takes a while. I try to keep my podcast posted on Facebook too, but then also anywhere you listen to podcasts, if you're just looking for straight audio, you can listen to the podcast there as well. And if you got ideas on topics or how another place that I need to be, let me know, because I'm all ears. I want to be out there wherever I can, trying to help as many folks as I can get started trapping, because I love it. And if you catch a critter, you'll love it too, because it is absolutely exciting and consuming sometimes. So anyway, y'all have a good summer. We'll talk to you next time.